Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Last Call Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Paul Clement, here on June 15th. A beautiful, sunny, cool evening here in Southern Ontario. And we have another fantastic episode for you to enjoy this evening. I guess you'll be enjoying it tomorrow or later on. I don't know when you're going to be listening to it, if I'm being honest. But we're going to be doing wildcards today. So, literally players that I believe can either help you win a championship or submarine your system in a really quick manner based on their current ADPs and what we're hoping and expecting from these players. A couple other news items have trickled in as well over the past week. So, with all that said, let's get right to it, folks. Let's make it a quick one. Cheers on a Monday. Okay, want to take the opportunity before we dive in to just ask everybody if you have not already subscribed, and I know that there are some of you that have watched our stuff probably consistently that have not yet subscribed, make sure you do so just as we try to grow the community here and hopefully get a little bit of traction. We are, of course, just doing this for fun. It's a hobby of ours to chat about fantasy football between Bobby and I and any other special guests that we bring on. But if you want to be a part of that, make sure you subscribe. If you're enjoying this kind of content, dynasty-based content, anything and everything that comes to fantasy football, make sure that you are subscribed. Uh, that'll be that little disclaimer there. Let's jump right into the news with the first line item here being that Jalen Coker, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, has signed a 3-year extension, 3 years, $35 million, which is a huge top up based on what he was making previously as a undrafted free agent. He was someone that I was pretty high on in dynasty circles coming out of, I think it was Holy Cross a couple seasons ago, and he has done nothing but perform quite admirably as that power slot player for the Carolina Panthers. He has put up some good fantasy weeks for you, and I think that solidifying him as a part of this offense is a good sign for Bryce Young, who's now worked with him for 2 seasons. Jalen Coker is a big, good hands sort of wide receiver out of the slot, so it's really interesting to see what the Carolina Panthers have done with Bryce Young, and that's surround him with these big wide receiving options just to take away some of the, I guess, minimize the margin that he has to throw to and just expand the margin that he has as a barrier there so that he can just put the ball up and let these skilled wide receivers go up and get the ball. So congrats to Jalen Coker on that. He was a guy that I picked up off of free agency in our dynasty league a couple years ago, and I'm happy to see him flourishing in Carolina. The next piece of news that I didn't really have any notification of until recently was that RJ Harvey underwent a labrum surgery this during this offseason, which I think has kind of flown under the radar for a lot of folks. Kind of adds to his um, risk factor, I suppose you could say, because if he was rehabbing that over the past couple months when he could have been um, working on improving his game or becoming more explosive, learning the offense, all those different things, he had to put his energy into rehabbing that shoulder. Then I think it's certainly an arrow down kind of factor when you look at all the ups and downs that go with a player in their offseason. Apparently, he suffered this in the AFC Championship game too. So this happened relatively recently in terms of when an injury could have potentially happened to a player. So uh, hopefully things are going well. I mean, it sounds like he's participating in camp, but certainly I think it's something that we have to keep an eye on as we get into the throes of training camp and see if this continues to linger around and whether or not he's affected at all by that. Final piece of news. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot going on in the NFL, guys. So if there's going to be anything to talk about, it's probably going to be contracts this time of year. Pat Mahomes gets an additional 2 years added onto his mega deal, which I think makes him certainly up there, maybe the highest paid quarterback. I think the annual average value is about $64 million a year. That's the average. So I'm sure they're going to do some funny money stuff and make sure that it's going to continue to be team friendly as he continues his career with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, the total sum is something over $500 million. I think it's over $504 million now. So kudos to him. He is the face of the franchise and face of the NFL, and he is cashing in as long as he comes back and continues to play football at a high level, which I do believe he will. All indications are that he will play week 1. I think the NFL knew that when they made the NFL schedule, and they decided that the Chiefs would have the first, I think it's Monday night game. So not any of those primetime games between Thursday and Sunday, but the Monday night slate is where he will get to shine if he is in fact ready with that knee that he is recovering from. So congrats to him as him and his family continue to be generationally wealthy into the far, far future. Okay, everybody. Um, Now for the meat of the episode. Let's just power through. We're not going to take any breaks because it's just me talking into the void here, and I'm sure you can only take so much of that. So let's focus on the meat of the episode. Let's talk about our fantasy wildcards. Now, again, the way I want to define this is players that are being taken with relatively high draft capital that have the absolute potential to help compete and get your team to a championship with the performances that we've seen in the past. But we also have to be aware of the potential pitfalls and the potential downfalls for these players as we set up our fantasy rosters. And being aware of these players and how much risk you're willing to take on as your appetite, I think is going to be key. If you start piling up a couple wild cards and they start to fall the wrong way, I think we've all seen those teams kind of fall by the wayside pretty quickly when it comes to long term success in dynasty and in redraft. So give me a quick second here. I know we said just jump right in, but give me 1 second and we will get ready with our wild cards. Okay, we are back, and the very first player that I would like to talk about is kind of a sore spot for me because I've been high on this player in the past. He's performed when he's not been on my roster. I just took him in our Dynasty Startup League as a potential wide receiver 2 or 3 for me, and that is Jameson Williams. And I feel like he is the consummate wild card player every single season. The first couple years, I feel like people were buying the draft capital, the hype, and all those different variables when it comes to a fantasy player. And he certainly didn't perform based on injury, based on suspension, based on all those different things. I think since then, I truly believe that he has become a darling of Dan Campbell's. He has worked his butt off. He's improved his game in all the areas that they want him to. And I think he and Amon-Ra St. Brown are now the 2 wide receivers that will be on the field when they start to go heavy sets if they decide to go that way. But the problem I see, and it's obvious when you actually think about it, is that Sam Laporta missed a lot of time last year, and he operates in a lot of the same areas of the field that Jameson Williams does. A lot of these crossing routes, shallow and intermediate. He works on these yak opportunities, and if he's fully healthy, which he's on track to be, he was battling a back injury. So if he's back from that back injury, Sam Laporta, then you have to imagine he's going to be integrated into this offense on a much higher level. And simply, I think that means you're taking away some opportunities from a already small piece of the pie kind of player in Jameson Williams. I mean, he had his career high in receptions last year. I think it was 64 or 65 receptions to get him to that 1,100 and some odd change yard mark with 7 touchdowns. And that was a top 12 wide receiver performance last year in full PPR. But it's going to be hard to imagine that that is going to be replicable, especially if Sam Laporta is healthy. And with Drew Petzing coming in to the Detroit stadium as the new offensive coordinator, it's going to be difficult to understand what he's going to do from an offensive coordinating perspective. He was very heavy into the tight ends and big tight end sets in Arizona. You saw that when they drafted Tip Ryman. They were kind of ahead of the game in a lot of ways when they came to using two tight ends, three tight ends, and I wonder if that's going to take him off the field somewhat. But the upside is obvious, like the absolute speed demon. I think he's beloved by the coaching staff, the incumbent coaching staff, and I think that he will maintain on the field. What his role will be is what we're going to have to keep an eye on because he already came with a little bit of boom and bust potential last season. We saw that before Dan Campbell took over that the play calling, he was almost a non-factor. But then after the Week 8 bye, he was a mainstay in that offense, and that's really where the meat of his fantasy season came into fruition. So he is my first wild card player here in this category for us. The second player that I would like to talk about is a quarterback who has absolutely, I think, stolen a narrative of being like one of the guys at quarterback when it comes to who you want in the early rounds. And that's Lamar Jackson. And I think that has, I think, well, he is his own agent, which I want to start off with. So I don't know what kind of information he chooses. The information he chooses to leak and to share is almost completely on him in a lot of ways. And I think last year you saw with a lot of the weird injury reports, like middle of the week injury reports that would pop up with him dealing with this or dealing with that. I don't know how much of that was contract related. I know that he is currently working on trying to get a new contract together with the Ravens, and it certainly sounds like the Ravens are anticipating they will get one done. I would be shocked if they didn't. But at the end of the day, he manages his own career, and I think in a lot of ways, when he gets banged up, he's not incentivizing himself to go and play through an injury, perhaps. So we know that when his contract was up a couple years ago and he was renegotiating that with the Ravens, he was looking for more guaranteed money. The Ravens didn't really buckle. They were not going to give him the Deshaun Watson deal. So I think that maybe that irked him, and it's been a couple years now, and now he's looking at the current payday that a lot of these quarterbacks are getting, and I'm sure he's like, I'm a two-time MVP. What do I get? What do I get out of all this? And we saw last year, whether it was injury related, play calling related, um, age related, he was not rushing. He was not as dynamic in the pocket. He was not moving around the pocket as well. He was not scrambling. He was getting chased down, which we have never seen happen. So you have to imagine that has something to do with the injuries. However, he's approaching 30. We know that it's kind of a threshold for a lot of these athletic quarterbacks to start regressing in their rushing capabilities and rushing output. So if we start to see that dip quite a bit, I would be much more comfortable looking at the Drake Mays, the Jaden Daniels, the heck, Malik Washington, not Malik Washington, Malik Willis at the end of a draft for just the rushing upside that comes with these guys. And we will have to wait. And again, it's this is why he's a wild card, because we know what the ceiling is. We've seen the ceiling. He's a league winning quarterback when he is on, and he is going full speed on the passing game and the rushing attack. And it's just going to be a matter of whether or not he can get back to that prime time Lamar Jackson. We also know that they brought in a new offensive coordinator, Declan Doyle, who was helping out with the offense on the Chicago Bears with Ben Johnson last season. That was really his only offensive coordinating experience, and I guess he took a job with the Ravens as a chance to be their play caller. So we'll have to see what kind of trickles in from that Sean Payton, Ben Johnson sort of offense, we've already seen that they've invested in wide receivers. Uh, what's his name? Elijah Surratt and Jalen. It's Jalen something, but he's a big outside receiver. I almost wonder if they start to go a bit more spread, where a lot of the league is going into these heavier tight end sets. I almost wonder if they are going to embrace going back to a more 11 personnel, spread personnel, when you can get four receivers on the out there in the formation with Andrews out of the slot. Like, there's a lot of potential here, and I think it's going to look a lot different than what we've seen in the past. Remember, they've lost Patrick Ricard, their fullback, so no real replacement there in the fullback position to lead block for Derrick Henry. No real, I mean, they did draft a tight end, I believe, in the fourth or fifth round, Matt Hibner, to help shore up that tight end room, which is really shallow now with Isaiah Likely departed and Charlie Kolar departed, both of which, one a pass catcher, one of them a blocker. And I'm not sure what this offense. I think this offense is going to look drastically different come 2026. So mark my words on that one. All right, and now the next one on our list, Christian McCaffrey. And of course, if you've owned Christian McCaffrey at any given point, you know that he is one of the true wild cards that we have come to enjoy in fantasy football, or bemoan in fantasy football. I think when we look at the stat sheet from last year and we see that he was the RB1 uh, in, I think, all formats, and you just look at the amount of volume that he took on in that offense, a lot of that is attributed to the fact that Ayuk did not report. Deebo Samuel was gone. Ricky Pearsall was hurt all the time. Jawan Jennings was kind of in and out of the lineup, if I'm not mistaken. The George Kittle got hurt in the playoffs. Never mind. But a lot of his production, a lot of his fantasy value came from the pass game because there was nobody else to throw the ball to at the end of the day for Brock Purdy. So I think that itself is going to regress. And then we look at the total touches that he had last year, which was a career high. It was well into the 400s. And we have seen running backs that take on that amount of volume tend to regress in a strong way. We just saw this with Saquon Barkley, where he had well over 400 touches between playoffs and regular season, and just was not the same guy, did not have the same burst going into the next year. And that it's fair. It happens, especially to older running backs whose juice, is important to their game. So you take away some receiving work, you take away, he's another year older, you take away a little bit more spark in the running game. Uh, he himself has been sapped by injuries throughout his career, and it does almost seem like it's a coin toss whether he's going to be durable or not in a given season. He was the only one to make it through that season, it felt like, without a nick on his injury card. But can you rely on that from a 30-year-old running back behind an offensive line that has not performed especially well? Trent Williams, I think, missed a lot of time last year as well, if I'm not mistaken. And just, I think there's going to be a regression in the passing game. So he's being taken as the sixth player in ADP in current mock drafts. So I don't expect a another RB1 season. Sorry, I don't expect a RB1 overall season. I think he could very well finish as a top 12 running back, but take that as a warning from me that this is a guy that I was not personally looking for in my dynasty startup. The next player I would like to talk about is Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice. I mean, if you haven't heard of all the shenanigans that he's been up to, all the news and all mis the wrongdoings that he has committed in this offseason alone, then you are clearly living under a rock. But as a result of breaking his probation, he ended up in jail for 30 days shortly after having received a cleanup procedure on his knee. So he is rehabbing a knee injury in a facility I would say is less than, top grade for rehabbing injuries. But we've also, again, seen the kind of production. He's a top 5 fantasy wide receiver when he's on the field. And now it's just a matter of like your risk tolerance for this player. I think in Dynasty, especially, this is putting Rashee Rice owners in a bind. What do you do with a guy who is so darn good in this particular Chiefs system that cannot stay out of trouble, seemingly? The Chiefs have already come out and said they have no plans right now to extend him, and he is looking for JSN money as a former second round pick to the Chiefs, and it's a tenuous situation at best when it comes to this guy. If he comes back and the rehabilitation goes well post jail time, and he's looking good in training camp, he will probably earn his third round draft capital in drafts right now. And it's I don't think there's going to be a suspension by the NFL. Like if there is, I feel like that moment has already kind of come and gone for them to have disciplined the guy. So it's going to be hard to say. I think in Dynasty, you don't, it's complete wild card. He could end up in a situation where he's completely misused. He's buried. People don't know how to properly use him. It was very encouraging that Andy Reid saw the potential in this guy, and they implemented him and deployed him in such a way that was absolutely dominant in eating up zone coverage, and just run after the catch ability was through the roof. It's going to be um, a true. This is why we're talking about this guy. A true coin toss. Um, so on top of rehabbing the D in jail, we have to hope he comes back healthy from that. The Chiefs, however, did not bring in any new pass catchers really. I think they spent a fifth round pick on a wide receiver, but they really didn't address tight end. They didn't bring in a high drafted wide receiver. The squad effectively is going to be what it was last year with Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelsey, Tyquan Thornton as their deep threat, Rashee Rice working out of the slot and over the middle, and all those other things in zone coverage. So that's a good thing, I guess. Like there's not any added competition for him specifically, but I think all these other extenuating circumstances are going to hurt his ability to consistently see the field into the future. So maybe that's the best way to look at it. If you're in redraft and we get to the end of August and there's no news from the NFL that he has not received, there's no news that he has received a suspension of any kind, then away you go, draft him with confidence, and you're probably going to get a good bargain on him because a lot of people are going to be scared off by him. For Dynasty, I think you kind of have to hold until he bounces back in terms of value. He's certainly rock bottom in value right now. You're not going to get a fair deal. If you want to hit the eject button, you're going to have to wait till a couple good weeks have been strung together by this guy on the actual gridiron. Um, Last piece here too, you have to remember that they were running a very short pass, quick pass game with Pat Mahomes and a lot of these receivers for the past couple years with Matt Nagy, which is very vanilla, boring kind of offense. They just brought back Eric Bieniemy, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. He was the offensive coordinator when Pat Mahomes was hucking 50-yard bombs every other play. It felt like. So is that a good or bad thing, Rice? I don't have the know-how or data analysis to be able to dive into that, but it's going to be a different looking offense as well. Probably more heavily leaning on the run game with Kenneth Walker, who they just paid money to, and one of the best offensive lines that has been invested in as well. So we'll have to. I mean, something you have to keep an eye on. I think you keep an eye on this summer, the news that develops around him. You draft him with confidence. If it's a all green lights go at the end of August, and if there isn't, then you have to bake that into your risk assessment. Okay, the next guy we have is Bucky Irving. running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And again, one of these players who just dazzled us with his change of direction, his stop start jerky nature when it came to getting upfield against these defenders and making people miss. It's a new situation we're looking at this year. Yes, Rashad White has been signed by the Washington Commanders, but they did bring in and paid pretty good money to Kenneth Gainwell, who was the leading receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. Take that for whatever you want. And I guess between Kenneth Walker, Sean Tucker, who also got paid by the Buccaneers, who was previously a UDFA, Bucky has almost this three-headed monster that he's going to have to battle in order to produce for the ADP that he's currently going at. He's currently going at that 3-4 turn in drafts, which is kind of a sweet spot where a lot of high value receivers and a lot of onesies are starting to get taken. And if you take a Bucky Irving there, not only are you going to have to compete against these other options they have, Sean Tucker is profiles as a bigger back who can do early down work. Kenneth Gainwell profiles as that player who can catch a lot of passes and be involved in third down and beyond, be a part of the pass game, which is kind of Bucky Irving's things. Like I think they saw what happened in that rookie season where he was getting a lot of work and just it seemed like you had to peel him off the turf at the end of the game. He, ice packs on knees and shoulders, and like the guy got beat up a lot. And I think they see that. And unfortunately, I think the step up to the NFL and the fact that he was a fourth round pick makes him interchangeable, and I'm sure this is all weighing on his mind because he's already come out and admit that there's been mental health issues that have come along with all these physical injuries that he just hasn't had to deal with before. So just coming back and trying to fight through these physical injuries has taken a mental toll on the player. But you can see in his box score from last year before he got hurt, he was still Bucky Irving, like putting up over 20 points a game for those first month. Um, on average. It was very impressive play by this player, and he's so electric and so fun to watch. It's going to be a shame if he gets taken away from the game because of these issues, um, especially the injuries side of things. He's going through practice, but he's participating in a non-contact jersey. And I hate to say it, but we do see this sometimes where day three running back picks, there's just not a lot of loyalty to these guys. So unless he can bounce back in a big way, if he can get his body right, get his head right, I think he's still going to be the lead dog there. However, financial commitments have been made to these other two players, and there's no way you can shake the fact that they are not going to be involved. So I'll leave it at that. And finally, the last player that I want to talk about, um, another player I would say is kind of a sore spot for me because in my keeper league, I gave up a lot of draft capital to make sure that I was able to pick him at the 101 in one of our leagues, but that's Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, we all know the story. It hasn't been so long that we can't remember how every single analyst, every single fantasy football analyst, every single NFL analyst, everybody had this guy as their wide receiver one, can't miss project, can't miss prospect, sorry, can't miss prospect, size, technician, quicks, release packages, sure hands, everything. Like this guy, other than like maybe breakaway speed, which I think everybody acknowledged he did not have, this was a player that was not supposed to miss the way that he has missed so far. It could very well be that these expectations have gotten to him mentally because I don't know if everybody remembers that game against the Seahawks, I think it was, where he went up and mossed a guy in the end zone for a touchdown, and he just fell down to a knee and felt like weight was off his shoulders. Unfortunately, he had to deal with a string of injuries last year between a heel injury, A couple of the things that were nagging him, he ended up missing some significant time. And unfortunately, what we didn't get to see was the potential for a player of his potential caliber in an offense where they were just passing the damn ball. Jacoby Brissett was well over 40 attempts a game. And during those weeks where Marv missed, we got to see Michael Wilson evolve into a beautiful butterfly. And Trey McBride was blossoming as this number one overall tight end and was getting in the end zone consistently. And all this potential production, because there was no running game, because the offensive line was not very good, all their running backs were hurt. They had to throw the ball, and we didn't even get to see the potential production from this kind of player that we were hoping to see in what was a optimal situation to finally get a read on a guy he was hurt for. And nobody's more frustrated than I am, trust me. Um, so what do we do? They have a new offensive coordinator. Um, I just saw his name. I'm sorry. Um, anyway, new offensive play caller, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, whether they want to decide to ride with him or not. New competition, however, they just drafted Jeremiah Love, number 3 overall, and I mean, he's a capable pass. Like, he's going to take some passing work away, but I think they're going to be more committed to the run. Mike LaFleur, brother to Matt LaFleur, comes from this tree where I think they want to be committed to running the ball and being more balanced. So if the number of pass attempts and opportunities comes down on that aspect, and he's still competing with Trey McBride, still competing with Michael Wilson, competing with Jeremiah Love, uh, I don't know where enough volume comes from for him to end up meeting that potential that we've always expected. I currently am not keeping him in my keeper league unless news comes out that he's going to be the feature guy, unless news comes out, unless I see in preseason that he's out there dominating and just being a focal point of the offense, then I'll have something to think about. However, he's like, I'm trying to think of a good comparison. He is just not been the difference maker that everyone hoped when he was drafted. I'm sure I'm forgetting a good example here, but the fact of the matter is he has when he has had opportunity as well, he's also had a drop problem, like a catch point problem. And for a guy of his size, you wouldn't expect that to be the case. Um, with his technician ability and be able to get open, you wouldn't expect him to be bobbling balls like mid route and tipping them to defenders. And last year was not a good example of his potential hands ability. And it was painful to watch sometimes. And I'm just screaming at the television expecting him, this cannot miss prospect, to be better. And until we see it, it's going to be hard to believe in a guy. But if he does, if it's the same story coming out of Arizona right now. He's the first one in the practice facility. He's the last one to leave. He's putting in all this work. I just Instead of putting in all this work, why don't you just find a self-help book and get some confidence? I understand you don't want to be that diva wide receiver. That's fine, but you have to have greater belief in yourself, and when you're on that field, you should be out there dominating. There should not be any tentative nature to this guy, and it should be production city. But until we see it, unfortunately, I'm going to have to pass. But that's what makes him one of the biggest wild cards, in my opinion. Honorable mention, I'll throw it here: Mike Evan and Ricky Pearsall. Um, I think it goes without saying that in San Francisco, especially, these guys have all the ability in the world. I think Mike Evans is certainly going to be a Hall of Famer one day. Ricky Pearsall, first round draft pick, who has just not been able to stay healthy over the first 2 or 3 years here. 2 years, I think. So this is a pivotal season for Ricky Pearsall, and we need them both to stay healthy because the wide receiver room is not incredibly stocked for the San Francisco 49ers. They are going to depend on these two players to run the offense until George Kittle gets back, and he seems to think he'll be back by week 1. I would be shocked if that's the case. But if he is, that is a nice trio of pass catchers in Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall, and George Kittle. A little bit older, perhaps, but certainly capable of making some noise in the NFC West. So we'll have to wait and see how that all pans out over the summer as well. Hopefully, everyone stays healthy, and we can just hit week one, going full tilt, and see what this Shanahan offense can really do once again and get back to that glory. Okay, everybody, that's going to do it for me. I just did a lot of talking. I hope you enjoyed. And like and subscribe. Make sure you hit that like button to get us out there to everybody that has not already liked or subscribed or seen any of our stuff. And hopefully, we are able to add some new friends to the community. Make sure you write in the comments if there's anybody you think is a bigger wild card. There's a lot of options out there, and these are the ones that I kind of landed on. But let me know what you guys landed on as well. I'd be happy to see what you guys have in mind in terms of those. But we will see you next week. Bobby should be back, and we're going to start getting into our rankings. So we're going to start ranking our quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs. So stay tuned for all that fun. And until then, that's going to do it for me, everybody. I hope you have a great night. Peace.